know, it's been a while. So today we're going to be talking about Samuel Little, the most prolific U.S. serial killer to date, also known as the choke and stroke killer, if that tells you anything about him. We're actually discussing him because he recently passed, which, you know, all due respect to his family as well as the victims and their families. Oh, I also do have my computer filled with notes right here, so if I'm not looking at you, that's what I'm looking at. So Samuel Little was born on June 7th, 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia, to a mother that he claimed was a prostitute. I don't think they ever backed up that claim, but shortly after his birth, his family then moved to Lorain, Ohio, where he was mostly raised by his grandmother. As early as junior high school, Little started displaying problems with discipline and achievement. He also has a very long history with law enforcement, so we're going to briefly cover some of that. In 1956, he was convicted of breaking and entering into a property in Omaha, Nebraska, which he was held in an institution for juvenile offenders for. Upon his release, he moved to Florida to live with his mother in around his late 20s, working at various times as a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant, which I guess kind of already sparks, you know, more red flags other than the already having problems in junior high, but we continue. Then, Little says that he began traveling more widely and has more run-ins with the law. So he was arrested in 8 states for crimes including driving under the influence, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and rape. He claimed he took up boxing during this time in prison and refers to himself as a former prize fighter. In 1961, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for breaking into a furniture store in Lorain. He was then released in 1964. By 1975, Little had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes such as theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and attacks on government officials, as well as the ones we've already listed. So really, these were all before any murders took place. So really, at any point, they could have just stopped the entire situation from happening, honestly. But now on to the murders. In 1982, Little was arrested in Pascagoula, Mississippi, charged with the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose Lapre, who had gone missing in September of that year. However, a grand jury declined to indict him for her murder, but while under investigation, Little was transferred to Florida to be brought to trial for the murder of 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount, whose body was found in September 1982 as well. Prosecution witnesses identified him in court as a person who'd spent time with Mount on the night before she disappeared. But due to mistrust of witness testimonies, he was acquitted in January of 1984. Afterwards, he moved to California, where he stayed in the vicinity of mostly San Diego. On October 1984, Little was arrested for kidnapping, beating, and strangling 22-year-old Lori Barros, who survived. So I guess she really was like the one that got away, that kind of crumbled his whole spree, I guess. I don't know. 1 month later, he was found by cops in the back seat of his car with an unconscious woman, also beaten and strangled, in the same location as the attempted murder of Barros. He served 2.5 years in prison for both crimes, which really, I mean, he tried to murder someone and then he was found with an unconscious, beaten, and strangled woman, only getting 2.5 years. Okay, nonetheless, we continue. Upon his release in February 1987, he immediately moved to Los Angeles, where he committed more than 10 murders. So really, they should have just stopped him at 1 and kept him in prison, but they didn't, so we have more to tell. He was convicted on September 5th, 2012, of the murders of 3 California women between 1987 and 1989. So he was also arrested on September 5th, 2012, at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and was extradited to California to face a narcotics charge. After which, the authorities used DNA testing to establish that he was involved in the murders of Carol Eileen Elford, killed July 13th, 1987, Guadalupe Duarte Apodaca, very sorry if I pronounced that wrong, killed September 3rd, 1987, and Audrey Nelson Everett, killed August 14th, 1989. All 3 were later found on the streets of LA. He was then extradited to LA, where he was charged on January 7th, 2013. A few months later, police stated that he was being investigated for involvement in 3 dozen murders committed in the 1980s, which until then had been undisclosed. This actually sparked the reopening of the LaPree murder case. September 2014, Little was tried for the murders of Elford, Nelson, and Apodaca, where prosecution presented DNA evidence as well as testimony of witnesses who were attacked at different times throughout his criminal career. September 25th, 2014, Little was found guilty, sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Yet on the day of his verdict, he still insisted his innocence. Then on November 9th, 2018, he confessed to the 1996 fatal strangulation of Melissa Thomas. And then just a few days later, on November 13th, he confessed to the 1994 murder of Denise Christie Brothers in Odessa, Texas, after confessing to a Texas Ranger in May 2018. So why they didn't say something in May is a little beyond me, but alright. He then pled guilty to the murder of brothers on December 13th and was granted another life sentence. Ector County, Texas District Attorney, and Wise County, Texas Sheriff's Office said on November 13th, Little had confessed to dozens of murders and may have committed more than 90 across 14 states between 1970 and 2005. He later went on to say that he did confess because he didn't want anyone to be wrongfully convicted for any of his crimes. In 2018, Little was convicted of the murder of one Texas woman in 1994. November 2020, Little confessed to 2 Florida murders, one of which a man was already wrongfully convicted for. Hence, you know, the I want to confess so more people aren't wrongfully convicted for my crimes. He did, going back to his background a little bit, he did say that he had a long-term girlfriend, Jean, who supported both of them through shoplifting for years. Even after Little had confessed to 93 murders, investigators could only link him to about 60, though the FBI did confirm involvement in at least 50 of those murders, which is the largest number of proven cases in U.S. history, making him the most prolific serial killer in the U.S., as well as being considered the deadliest serial killer in U.S. history. So he's allegedly murdered women across 19 states over a third of a century, ending in about 2005. When he confessed, he did say, you know, they're mostly women, virtually all of them were women. However, many of his victims' deaths were originally ruled an overdose or attributed to accidental or undetermined causes when their bodies were found, up until he'd confessed and, you know, had given names and places, and then they could kind of go back and tie those to him later. However, some of its victims' bodies still have not been found, which is kind of scary. The FBI is asking for information linked to Little's confessions. They do have descriptions of the victims in hopes that they will be found and justice can be sought and brought to their families for the heinous crimes that they have endured. While serving his 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole, Little died on December 30th, 2020 in a Los Angeles County area hospital at age 80. So that's all I have for today's video. If you guys like this kind of video, give it a like, let me know down below. I'm probably, you know, I'm studying law, so it's kind of one of the most interesting things to me is criminals and criminal activity, you know, the psychology behind why they commit their crimes, stuff like that. So if you guys have any recommendations for future videos or even thoughts on this, leave them down below. See you next time.